What if I told you the next world war could start over ice? 3 days ago, President Trump announced that Greenland's strategic importance to American security cannot be ignored any longer. Within hours, Greenlandic Prime Minister Mute Egede issued a response that sent shockwaves through NATO headquarters. Greenland is not for sale, will never be for sale, and any attempt at forced acquisition will be met with total resistance. But here's what the headlines won't tell you. This isn't just about Arctic real estate. It's about the largest untapped resource reserves on Earth, military bases that could control global shipping routes, and a confrontation that could shatter the NATO alliance forever. Trump's Venezuela operation proved he's willing to use military force to secure strategic resources. Now he's turned his attention to an island 3 times the size of Texas that sits between America and Russia like a frozen aircraft carrier. You think this is about mining rights and military bases? Think again, because what's happening in Greenland right now is the opening move in a race for Arctic supremacy that will determine which superpower controls the resources and shipping routes of the 21st century. And the clock is ticking faster than the ice is melting. Let me show you why Greenland just became the most dangerous place on Earth. The island that changes everything. Greenland isn't just the world's largest island. It's the ultimate strategic prize in a warming world where ice caps are melting and revealing resources that could power civilization for the next century. The numbers are staggering. Greenland sits on an estimated 25% of the world's remaining oil reserves, 13% of known uranium deposits, and the largest untapped reserves of rare earth minerals outside China. As Arctic ice melts, these resources become accessible for the first time in human history. More critically, melting ice is opening shipping routes that could reduce cargo transport times between Asia and Europe by 40%. Control Greenland, and you control the future of global trade and energy. For 3 years, Trump has watched China and Russia establish Arctic footholds, while American influence in the region stagnated. Chinese icebreakers now regularly patrol Arctic waters. Russian military bases dot the Arctic coastline. Both countries have invested billions in Arctic infrastructure, while America focused on Middle Eastern conflicts and European security. Trump's advisors call it the Arctic Gap, the strategic vulnerability that could allow America's competitors to dominate the most resource-rich region on Earth. But there's a problem. Greenland belongs to Denmark, a NATO ally with 700 years of historical claims to the island. Any American attempt to acquire Greenland would require either Danish consent or direct violation of international law and NATO treaty obligations. Trump's Venezuela operation demonstrated he's comfortable with the latter option. The fear factor. What makes Trump's Greenland interest truly alarming to European leaders is the precedent established by Operation Silent Thunder in Venezuela. 3 weeks ago, Trump proved he's willing to use military force to acquire strategic resources, even when it means betraying allies and violating international law. The Venezuela operation succeeded because most countries assumed America wouldn't risk global confrontation over regional resources. That assumption no longer exists. Danish intelligence reports leaked to European media reveal growing American military activity near Greenland that has no official explanation. American submarines have been detected in Danish Arctic waters. American reconnaissance aircraft have increased flights over Greenlandic territory by 300% since December. Most concerning, American special forces have conducted training exercises in northern Canada, just 200 miles from Greenland's coast. The pattern is identical to pre-operation activities in Venezuela. Danish Prime Minister Mette Frederiksen reportedly told EU leaders that Denmark is gravely concerned about American intentions regarding Greenlandic sovereignty. According to leaked diplomatic cables, Frederiksen warned that Trump might be preparing unilateral action to secure Greenlandic resources, regardless of Danish objections. European intelligence agencies are treating Greenland as an active crisis zone rather than a theoretical concern. But the most alarming development isn't American military positioning. It's the systematic campaign to justify potential military action through security arguments that mirror the pretexts used for previous American interventions. The security pretext. Trump's renewed interest in Greenland comes packaged with national security arguments that intelligence analysts recognize as preparation for military justification. American officials have begun describing Chinese and Russian Arctic activity as direct threats to American homeland security that require immediate and decisive response. Pentagon briefings now classify Greenland as critical infrastructure, essential to American defensive capabilities. The arguments follow a familiar pattern. Chinese research stations in Greenland are described as potential dual-use facilities that could support military operations. Russian icebreaker patrols are characterized as territorial violations that threaten American shipping. Greenlandic mineral agreements with non-American companies are presented as resource security threats that could give adversaries leverage over American technology industries. Each argument creates justification for American intervention to protect Greenlandic sovereignty from foreign influence. The irony is breathtaking. America is preparing to violate Greenlandic sovereignty in order to protect it from violation by other countries. But the security arguments serve a deeper purpose than public justification. They're designed to pressure Denmark into voluntary transfer of Greenlandic control to prevent American unilateral action. Intelligence sources report that American diplomats have begun informal discussions with Danish counterparts about burden-sharing arrangements for Greenlandic defense. The conversations reportedly include suggestions that Denmark lacks the military capability to defend Greenland against Russian or Chinese aggression, requiring American protective involvement. The subtext is clear: transfer control voluntarily or watch America take control by force while claiming to defend Danish interests. Denmark's impossible position. Denmark finds itself caught between impossible choices that could destroy its security, economy, and international relationships. Resisting American pressure risks American military action that Denmark cannot prevent or survive. Danish military forces include 15,000 active personnel and a navy designed for coastal defense, not Arctic warfare against the world's most powerful military. If America decides to take Greenland by force, Denmark has no capability to stop it, but accepting American demands would destroy Denmark's relationship with the European Union and NATO allies who view Greenlandic sovereignty as a test of collective defense principles. If America can pressure Denmark into surrendering territory, every NATO member becomes vulnerable to similar pressure from larger allies. Most critically, transferring Greenland would eliminate Denmark's status as an Arctic power and major energy producer, reducing one of Europe's wealthiest countries to strategic irrelevance. Danish officials are privately exploring options that seemed unthinkable just months ago. According to classified EU documents leaked by Danish intelligence sources, Denmark has requested emergency consultations with France and Germany about European military support for defending Greenlandic sovereignty. The discussions reportedly include potential deployment of French nuclear submarines and German naval forces to Arctic waters. Denmark is also exploring legal options through international courts, though American withdrawal from various international legal frameworks limits the effectiveness of legal challenges. Most desperately, Denmark is attempting to internationalize Greenlandic defense through enhanced EU Arctic cooperation and potential involvement by Norway and Iceland in collective defense arrangements. But all these options require time that Denmark may not have. Greenland's awakening. The most significant development in the crisis is Greenland's own response to renewed annexation pressure. For decades, Greenlandic politics focused on gradual independence from Denmark while maintaining economic and security relationships that ensured stability. Greenlandic leaders generally avoided international confrontations while building autonomous institutions and economic partnerships. Trump's pressure has transformed Greenlandic politics overnight. Prime Minister Mute Egede, previously focused on domestic development issues, has become an international spokesman for Arctic sovereignty and indigenous rights. His response to Trump's renewed interest was swift and uncompromising. Greenland belongs to Greenlanders. We will determine our future, and that future does not include foreign control by any power. But Egede's defiance comes with recognition that Greenland lacks the military or economic capacity to resist American pressure independently. Greenlandic officials have begun unprecedented diplomatic outreach to European capitals, Arctic countries, and international organizations to build support for Greenlandic sovereignty. The strategy includes appeals to indigenous rights organizations, environmental groups concerned about Arctic exploitation, and countries threatened by great power expansion. Most significantly, Greenland has begun exploring security partnerships that would make American annexation more costly and complicated. Intelligence reports suggest that Greenlandic leaders have discussed potential agreements with European countries for military cooperation, economic partnerships with non-American companies, and even limited cooperation with Russian and Chinese Arctic initiatives as leverage against American pressure. The strategy is high risk. Greenlandic cooperation with American adversaries could provide Trump with justification for immediate military intervention to prevent hostile foreign influence in American Arctic approaches. But Greenlandic leaders appear to have concluded that accommodation with American demands would result in annexation anyway, making resistance the only option for preserving any semblance of independence. The Russian factor. Russia's role in the Greenland crisis adds complexity that could escalate regional tensions into global confrontation. For 2 decades, Russia has invested heavily in Arctic capabilities, viewing the region as essential to economic revival and strategic security. Russian icebreakers patrol Arctic waters year-round. Russian military bases extend along the Arctic coastline. Russian energy companies have developed extraction capabilities specifically designed for Arctic conditions. American control of Greenland would fundamentally alter Arctic strategic balance by providing the United States with forward bases capable of monitoring and interdicting Russian Arctic operations. Russian President Putin has made clear that Russia views American Arctic expansion as an existential threat requiring immediate response. In recent statements, Putin described potential American control of Greenland as unacceptable escalation that threatens Russian Arctic sovereignty and security, but Russia's options for preventing American annexation of Greenland are limited and dangerous. Direct military intervention would risk nuclear confrontation over territory that Russia has no legal claim to defend. Economic pressure on Denmark could backfire by driving European countries toward American protection. Diplomatic protests carry little weight with an American administration that has already demonstrated willingness to violate international law for strategic advantage. Russia's most likely response involves asymmetric escalation designed to raise the costs of American Arctic expansion without triggering direct military confrontation. Intelligence sources report increased Russian military activity throughout the Arctic, including deployment of nuclear submarines near American territorial waters, expansion of Arctic air patrols that probe American defensive responses, and enhanced cooperation with China on Arctic research and development projects. Most concerning, Russia has begun what intelligence analysts describe as Arctic harassment operations, designed to demonstrate American vulnerability in Arctic regions. Russian ships have increased encounters with American vessels in Arctic waters. Russian aircraft regularly test American radar systems and defensive protocols. Russian cyber operations have targeted American Arctic research facilities and military installations. The message is clear. American expansion in the Arctic will face sustained Russian resistance that could escalate beyond anyone's ability to control. China's calculated response. China's approach to the Greenland crisis reflects sophisticated strategic thinking about long-term Arctic competition. For 15 years, China has positioned itself as an Arctic stakeholder, despite having no Arctic territory. Chinese investments in Arctic research, Greenlandic mining operations, and Iceland partnerships have established Chinese presence in the region without triggering the military responses that direct territorial claims would provoke. Chinese strategy emphasizes economic rather than military Arctic influence, using commercial relationships and investment partnerships to build influence that's difficult for other powers to counter without appearing to oppose economic development. American pressure on Greenland threatens this strategy by potentially eliminating Chinese economic access to Arctic resources through forced political realignment. China's response has been characteristically subtle and economically focused. Chinese companies have accelerated investments in Greenlandic mining operations, offering financing terms that neither American nor European companies can match. Chinese research institutions have expanded cooperation with Greenlandic universities and scientific organizations. Chinese diplomatic representatives have increased engagement with Greenlandic political leaders. offering support for Greenlandic autonomy and resistance to foreign pressure. The strategy is designed to increase the economic and political costs of American annexation while providing Greenland with alternatives to American or European economic dependence. But China's involvement creates additional justification for American intervention. Trump administration officials have begun characterizing Chinese investments in Greenland as economic warfare, designed to establish Chinese military capabilities near American territory. Pentagon briefings now describe Chinese research stations as potential forward operating bases that could support Chinese military operations in the Arctic. Chinese involvement in Greenlandic resistance to American pressure provides Trump with exactly the foreign threat narrative needed to justify military action as defensive rather than expansionist. The NATO fracture. The Greenland crisis is creating the most serious internal NATO challenge since the alliance's formation. NATO's foundational principle requires collective defense of member territories against external aggression. But what happens when the aggression comes from the alliance's most powerful member against one of its oldest allies? Article 5 of the NATO treaty theoretically requires all NATO members to defend Denmark against any armed attack, including attacks by other NATO members. But the practical application of collective defense against the United States would destroy the alliance and trigger global realignment that could lead to worldwide conflict. European NATO members find themselves facing an impossible choice. Supporting Denmark against American pressure risks American withdrawal from European security commitments at a time when Russian forces remain positioned near European borders. Accepting American annexation of Greenland establishes precedent for larger powers pressuring smaller allies into territorial concessions. Intelligence reports reveal growing divisions within NATO leadership about how to respond to potential American action in Greenland. French President Macron has reportedly advocated for strong European response to any American violation of Danish sovereignty, including potential suspension of American participation in NATO decision-making processes. German Chancellor Scholz has emphasized diplomatic resolution while privately preparing for American disengagement from European security. Eastern European NATO members, dependent on American security guarantees against Russian pressure, have generally avoided public positions on Greenland while privately expressing concern about precedents for territorial revision within NATO. The divisions reflect deeper questions about NATO's future in a world where the alliance's dominant member pursues policies that conflict with collective defense principles and international law. The economic stakes. The economic implications of Greenland's annexation extend far beyond Arctic resource extraction to fundamental questions about global supply chain security and technological independence. Greenland's rare earth mineral deposits are essential for manufacturing semiconductors, renewable energy systems, electric vehicle batteries, and advanced military equipment. Current global production is dominated by China, creating vulnerabilities that the United States has struggled to address through domestic mining and alternative suppliers. Greenlandic rare earth deposits could provide the United States with resource independence in critical technology sectors while denying those resources to Chinese competitors. The economic benefits of Greenlandic control would be staggering. Conservative estimates suggest that Greenlandic oil reserves alone could be worth $20 trillion at current prices. Rare earth mineral deposits could support American technology industries for decades while generating hundreds of billions in export revenues. But economic benefits depend on the ability to extract and transport resources from one of the world's most challenging environments. Arctic extraction requires massive infrastructure investments, specialized technology, and environmental safeguards that would cost hundreds of billions of dollars to implement. Arctic shipping routes require icebreaker fleets, port facilities, and defensive capabilities that would take decades to develop. Most critically, Greenlandic resource extraction would face sustained opposition from environmental groups, indigenous rights advocates, and international organizations concerned about Arctic ecosystem preservation. The economic case for Greenlandic annexation assumes that short-term military costs and long-term extraction investments would generate returns sufficient to justify massive political and diplomatic risks. That assumption may prove catastrophically wrong. The environmental weapon climate change adds a dimension to the Greenland crisis that previous territorial disputes have never faced. Greenland's ice sheet contains enough water to raise global sea levels by 24 feet if completely melted. Accelerated melting due to resource extraction, military development, or ecosystem disruption could trigger global climate catastrophe affecting billions of people. Environmental organizations worldwide have begun characterizing any military action in Greenland as crimes against humanity due to potential climate consequences. International climate activists are organizing resistance campaigns designed to make Greenlandic occupation politically impossible for any democratic government. But environmental arguments cut both ways. American officials have begun arguing that Chinese and Russian Arctic development poses greater environmental risks than American-controlled extraction using advanced environmental technologies. The argument suggests that American control of Greenland would protect Arctic ecosystems from more damaging foreign exploitation. Environmental concerns also create new alliance possibilities for Greenlandic resistance. Countries threatened by sea level rise, including many Pacific Island nations, coastal African states, and low-lying European regions, have compelling interests in preventing Arctic development that could accelerate ice melting. Environmental organizations in the United States and Europe oppose policies that could trigger climate disasters. The combination of environmental and sovereignty arguments could create unprecedented international coalition opposing American annexation attempts. But environmental resistance takes time to organize and implement, while military action can succeed within days or weeks. The countdown to crisis. As of January 5, 2026, multiple indicators suggest that the Greenland crisis is approaching a decision point that could trigger immediate military action or diplomatic resolution. American military activity near Greenland continues to increase. Danish requests for European support have intensified. Greenlandic resistance to annexation has hardened. Russian and Chinese involvement in Arctic affairs has expanded. The situation resembles the pre-crisis period before the Venezuela operation, with American forces positioned for rapid action while diplomatic alternatives narrow toward military resolution. Intelligence sources report that Trump has requested detailed military assessments of options for securing American Arctic interests in Greenland. The Pentagon has reportedly prepared operational plans for scenarios ranging from protective deployment to comprehensive territorial control. Danish intelligence services have detected American Special Forces reconnaissance activities in northern Canada and increased submarine patrols near Greenlandic waters. European intelligence agencies assess that American military action could begin with minimal advance warning. Most concerning, diplomatic communications between Washington and Copenhagen have reportedly become increasingly confrontational, with American officials describing Danish positions as obstructionist and harmful to alliance interests. The pattern suggests that diplomatic alternatives are being systematically eliminated to justify military action as the only remaining option for protecting American security interests. What happens next? The Greenland crisis represents more than a territorial dispute. It's a test of whether international law, alliance obligations, and sovereignty principles can survive great power competition for critical resources. If America succeeds in acquiring Greenland through pressure or force, it establishes precedent for territorial revision based on resource requirements and strategic necessity. Other powers could apply similar logic to justify territorial expansion in resource-rich regions. If America fails to acquire Greenland, it risks Chinese and Russian consolidation of Arctic resources and shipping routes that could undermine American global influence for generations. The crisis forces fundamental questions about the future of international relations. Should resource scarcity justify territorial expansion? Can alliance obligations survive member competition for strategic advantage? Will environmental concerns constrain great power rivalry, or will climate change accelerate conflicts over habitable territory and available resources? The answers will determine whether the 21st century resembles the cooperative internationalism of recent decades or the imperial competition that defined previous centuries. Right now, the world is watching an island of 56,000 people become the focal point of a confrontation that could reshape global politics for generations. The ice is melting. The resources are exposed. the powers are positioned, and the clock is ticking toward a crisis that could determine whether sovereignty belongs to whoever can enforce it, or whether principles of international law can survive in a world where survival depends on controlling what remains of Earth's habitable resources. Greenland didn't ask to become the center of the world, but geography and geology have made it the place where the future of human civilization might be decided. The question isn't whether conflict is coming to the Arctic. The question is whether anyone can prevent it from consuming everything else.